Welcome to AiArthritis Voices 360. This is the official talk show for the International Foundation for Autoimmune and Autoinflammatory Arthritis, or AiArthritis for short. My name is Tiffany Westrich Robertson. I am the CEO of AiArthritis. Also, like all of our leaders at our organization, a person living with AiArthritis diseases. My primary diagnosis is non-radiographic axial spondyloarthritis, and I am not alone on this exciting 100th episode of our AiArthritis Voices 360 talk show. I am here with the lovely Layla. Hi, Layla.
Hey, everybody. Like Tiffany said, my name is Layla P.L. Vallette. I am the health education manager here at AiArthritis, as well as living with our diseases. I live with lupus and Sjogren's, and I am so excited to be a part of this milestone episode. I joined the hosting team of the AiArthritis Voices 360 podcast about a year and a half ago, and ever since then, I've learned so much from all of the different episodes that I've helped to host and all the other ones that everybody else has been a part of. So I'm so excited to be able to highlight these 3 episodes for you that we have seen have gotten the most traffic and the most listens. So we are so excited to pull some clips from those and also kind of give you a little bit of insight as well on top of that.
Awesome. So as we both have said, this is a milestone episode. We are at the official 100 mark. We are so excited. And what we decided to do is we wanted, first of all, let's give a shout out to Ryan and Christina, the producers of the show. Woo! They don't get enough credit and behind the scenes. And to all of the co-hosts we have, which you can find on our website. There are patients from all around the world who help lead and co-lead these. So we want to also take the opportunity to give them a shout out. We'd like to lastly mention this is a core program at AiArthritis. There are so many people who have written into us and said, wow, what I learned from your show has been so impactful. We even shout out to Danielle, one of our co-hosts, said that because of one of our episodes in reproductive health, that she realized she could still conceive, and guess what? A baby was the result. So what a great takeaway from that show. So today we've got 3 where we asked the producers, can you pull our top rated, as Layla said? And very interestingly enough, they all focus around awareness, education, and a little bit of research and research education. We do also cover public policy or advocacy at AiArthritis, but we also know that that is sort of a separate on your own segment that really requires patients to get involved with legislative efforts. So I'm not really that surprised that the education awareness, which is also fitting with Layla being our health education manager, that she's the one co-leading. And I'm the original founder, and I founded this as an education and awareness movement that turned into an official nonprofit. So I do find it interesting that it's still at the roots and the core of who we are, that the resources that seem to be of most interest are about those awareness, the need to raise awareness about our diseases, early detection, and communication with our rheumatologist. That made it into the top 3 as well. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to tee up the first here, which is about awareness. And it was with Effie, Eileen, and Carrie. What was the title of this one?
So it's episode 73, Arthritis Awareness. It's complicated.
So let's take a moment. We're going to play about 10 minutes worth of clips for that. But in the meantime, I also just want to make sure that everyone knows we are in an expansion mode here at AiArthritis, meaning we are taking everything in our work to the next level. We really hope that you will support that. So I'm taking a moment to encourage you to go to aiarthritis.org/donate. We are doing a campaign calling a Grand to Expand. And so for every $1,000 that we raise, we can bring this talk show globally and the resources connected to thousands of people who don't even know that we exist. We want to give our first shout out to Miss Deb, who is also a co-host, but who has given the first $1,000 to AiArthritis to help us expand. We are also, because it's the 100th show, if you could donate $100, we will give you a personal shout out as well on the next episode. So again, aiarthritis.org/donate, and let's roll clip number 1. I'm going to turn this over to some of our co-hosts here to start the conversation. And the first thing I thought we'd do by just throwing this on the table and revisiting it is just talking about why you think that awareness about our kind of arthritis, autoimmune arthritis, autoinflammatory arthritis, the type of arthritis associated with these auto diseases, why is education and awareness so important? I'm just going to throw it out there, and whoever wants to go first, go right ahead.
I'll go first. I think it's important because when I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis at 29, I was so shocked that what I was experiencing was even arthritis. I actually made my rheumatologist test me for everything other than RA because I was like, this doesn't make sense. I thought arthritis was just joint pain. So I actually fell victim to the misconceptions of arthritis. And so I think the awareness and the education about there to everyone not only helps people understand that arthritis is a serious disease, but also help them recognize the symptoms so that they start treatment earlier, because diseases are have better outcomes when treated earliest.
And like and like Eileen said, I was diagnosed 3 years later than planned. So I was having weird symptoms, chronic fatigue, joint pain. And I was in high school at the time, so doctors were like, oh, you're just an active teen, you have growing pains, stuff like that. But, you know, even with my dad having psoriasis, there wasn't anyone in my family or friend group who had any form of arthritis. So even with the knowledge of having a family member with an autoimmune disease, it wasn't really looked upon that I would have arthritis at 18. So, you know, when I went to see my pediatrician, she was like, oh, you're fine. But I kept kind of egging her on, like, my intuition is telling me something else. And I basically went on Google and did what you're not supposed to do and pretty much self-diagnosed myself. And then I went back 2 years later and I was like, you know, my hands look a little different. And it was more something that I could notice. And she was like, yeah, you should go see someone. And ironically, her sister happened to be a rheumatologist, but throughout those 2 years I was complaining to her, she didn't find it necessary for me to go even seek an opinion. So we just kind of, you know, left the doctor's office like everything's fine. You know, so, but it really wasn't. And that's kind of why I feel that it's important to discuss these things, because there's a lot of people out there, even with social media and a bunch of like awareness, there are people out there who do not have the answers still, even with modern technology and everything that we have going on. So that's why it's important to sort of talk about these things.
And I would just jump off of that with, you know, after all of this time and all of this, still not having the answers. I mean, that really is just the biggest and most important part of all of it, because the answers to figuring out what it is that's going on with us when we are feeling pain, not only in our joints, but in all these other places that really don't make a whole lot of sense, but also so many other symptoms that affect so many other parts of our bodies. You know, in trying to figure out what it is that's going on and trying to figure out what's wrong, it's so important both for the actual tangible physical medical diagnosis and treatment, but also in how we are perceived and understood by the people around us. And that's the people in our families, that's the people that we work with, that's just general society and kind of how they look at us with arthritis, with disabilities and all of that. And the more we can raise awareness, the more we can talk about what this is and what it means, the closer we get to that kind of understanding.
I was going to add to that, kind of more like the general public awareness part of it, the way we talk about it too, because a lot of times we kind of even ourselves just describe it as arthritis. But when you say rheumatoid arthritis or psoriatic arthritis, or you give it a different name or more of a name, then people are like, oh, that's not just arthritis, that is something else. And then on the day when we start talking about them, you know, more people are like, oh, I've heard of that, I don't really know what that is. So it's the day to learn what this is and understand more about it. And then hopefully people having those weird symptoms, having those, you know, unexplained, no diagnosis, know what to ask for, know what to look into, know, what these things actually are. And then hopefully the entire disease group gets more respect and more acknowledgement for what they actually mean to live with them.
Wow. You all just had really, really great examples. I have nothing else to add. Show over. No, but seriously, what you all really explained very poetically almost was a journey. You went from detection and diagnosis issues to, what's going on with me, to misunderstandings, which we're going to circle back on as well, to public education. We sort of touched on doctor education because that all rolls into it. And we will then lead into also talking today on this overlap, which we said in our introductions, is then you have this issue of, is the arthritis being ignored? Is it being ignored because the doctor doesn't think I have it? Am I too young? Is it being ignored because it's not typically associated with my disease? There's still a lot that goes around the arthritic component that if we understood it, we, meaning family members, meaning doctors, meaning the public, we could really start to see better detection, better diagnosis, earlier treatment, better quality of life. It all equals into this equation just on this word. And then it even equals into better overall health care, regardless of where you live, regardless of what country, and better outcomes for the healthcare system. Because if we're being treated early and we have better outcomes, then we have less chance of having comorbidities from uncontrolled inflammation.
Alrighty, and thank you so much again to our co-hosts who did help share their stories for this episode. Hearing each individual patient's story is so important, and I think that the more that we are able to hear the stories and hear the commonalities that we have, the more that we can push to help early diagnosis, early detection, and early treatment in order to make sure that people who are getting diagnosed with these diseases now and in the future can have a better experience than these patients like we did have before. And I think that that's what it's all about. It's about growing, learning more, and being able to help the next generation of those so they don't have to go through the same things that we did. And so if you resonated with any of what our co-host said on this episode and you'd like to tell us your story, you can go ahead and go to aiarthritis.org/rant and tell us more about your diagnosis story, all the different things that you've gone through, so that we can take those points and be able to push them through for projects to help us with early diagnosis, early detection, and early treatment for all of those different AI arthritis patients that are coming and listening to these talk shows.
Absolutely. So we're going to tee up here to the second one of the, and these are in no particular order of popularity. I might add, we just chose the way that we're going to release them. So the second one, the one in the middle here, is actually from our special series called RheumyRounds. And RheumyRounds is a break-off series where patients and rheumatologist professionals come to the table as equals to have heart-to-heart conversations about topics that as a result could improve our health care. So in this particular episode, it was a two-part series of RheumyRounds. We'll give a shout out to Lisa Zicker, Dr. Lisa Zicker from Washington University in St. Louis. We are not playing her clip, but she was in the second RheumyRounds of this, so you can find that on the website. But in this one, in the part 2, which was called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Improving Office Visit Communications. And this was done with my rheumatologist and our talk show segment RheumyRounds co-founder, Dr. Al Kim, or just Al, as he likes to be called. And then, funny fact, also Layla's uncle. What? It's true. You have to tune in at a different time, though, to hear that funny story. Anyway, so we're excited about this one being the clip because if we can't get anywhere, whether it is diagnosis or great health management, if we don't have great conversations with our rheumatologists. So we are going to go ahead and tee this one up. And don't forget, if you love the show and you want to support us as we expand to next levels, please go to aiarthritis.org/donate. give 1,000 for a grand to expand, or please, for in honor of our 100th episode, a $100 donation, and we will call out you and thank you on a future show. All right, Ryan, producer, let's tee it up.
Okay, so Al, you're up. Roll the dice. Good.
Where do I
bad,
start?
ugly?
I think I don't know. I can't think of an ugly situation.
Okay.
I'm sure there was. I just explained.
We covered the ugly.
Yeah. No, there's some bads, and they can really all go and get lumped into where I wasn't as effective as a listener. I'm not going to give specific examples, but there have been multiple times where I either phase out sometimes, or I just didn't fully understand the ask and I misinterpreted without clarifying. And this leads to just a hellhole of a pit that you have to try to dig out of in order to rebuild that trust. And I think, at the end of these clinics where all of a sudden it's like the last 2 or 3 patients of a day, this happens. Part of this is that our energy and our mood really has to match the intensity of the emotion of the ask, right? Yep. And this is a major source of burnout, along with dealing with electronic medical records, which is a separate topic.
Okay.
But for me, I'm either fortunate or whatever. I only see patients a half day a week because most of my work at WashU is in research. And so as a result, I can kind of emotionally just let it all out, right? But usually the rest of the day, I'm a bit of a zombie. Like I've given all I can. And so when I think of my colleagues who see patients 3, 4, even 5 full days a week, I don't understand how they manage their emotional reserve.
Their brain just can't handle anymore. Emotionally, and what you're investing into each patient.
Right.
At the end of the day, you're done.
Right. I mean, I think we're not all physicians are empaths, first of all, but of those who are, keeping it up at a 9 or a 10 level out of 10 is a lot of work. But I think. I look at that the other way around, is that a lot of our patients that are coming in with issues that are 11 or 12 out of a 10 scale, they're living it 24/7, and I just have to turn it on and off during these visits, right? So it kind of tells me also that I kind of need to work on managing those emotions and those energies to make sure it's consistent and at the intensity that is required to make sure that many of the people that I see are equally satisfied with the care they're getting and confidence with the plan moving forward. That's something, again, I think I never would have thought this would have been an issue during training, but of course during training, I was much more concerned about, am I making the right decision? Medically, I always want to make the right decision medically, but that's usually sometimes not the right decision in the real world. Right. And that's where, and that's where the, that active listening really is so critical. That it adds more than just subtle nuance. I mean, it can add just, a whole new layer of a difference in how you're going to present options.
No, that's a great point. So tell me about what you think, Al, are some of the best, doesn't have to be specific examples, but what makes a very good experience? What, if you were going to create some bulleted recommendations for this ebook?
Good question.
I know, and I didn't even prep you for it, so I'm just going cold.
Yeah, and there's just going to be silence, and the rest of this podcast is going to be super awkward because of it.
I highly doubt that.
And again, a lot of this really is dependent on kind of the time pressures of that clinic session.
Yeah.
But the more organized the patient is. And we've talked about this in prior podcasts. And I've heard you guys talk about this in prior podcasts, telling patients, organize your thoughts, right? And try to bring a list in, or better yet, send the list through the electronic, medical record system, all right, that can prep the provider with, talking points so that there isn't, so that at least there's, an ability for me to be able to say, I've looked at these and I can lump these into 3 major things. And I want to run through them, just double check whether or not this is consistent with the way you're thinking, right? Out of the list of, say, 20 things that are there, right? So that saves so much time, but it also addresses all 20 of those concerns, right? And so we don't do a very good job of that in our clinic. We don't prep our patients to think like that, right? And again, there's so much room for for improvement in how we care for our patients. But this would be probably one of the next steps that we would do, at least within our lupus center, is try to come up with these type of forums. I know the Lupus Foundation of America has some stuff. The GlaxoSmithKline has some stuff through the programs through for their Belimumab product. And so there are resources. We just need to do a better job of disseminating them, instructing our patients on how to best use them, and then actually using them. When we, in our research group, we'll use things like Slack, other things would be like Discord, right? Where, it's this asynchronous communication, right? That we kind of do a little bit in medicine, with phone calls in the past and portal messages, now, but I think, we don't use it to prep for a formal visit and trying to extract out as much value within a very limited amount of time, right? So that, I think, is something we just need to do a better job of just executing.
Deb, what do you think makes for a really good experience?
So
communication wise.
Yes. I'm going to give a shout out to my rheumatologist here in Madison, Christy Bartles. I figured you'd know her because again, she's in the research world as well.
So good.
Yeah. So every time I am at ACR, I always try to go and hop in on whatever she's participating in. And she, during appointments, will tell me what she's knee deep in as far as research goes. But she is fabulous because she brings in this document. So as she's asking how things are going, she's filling in everything on this. It's a tear off sheet. So I get a copy and she keeps a copy, and it reminds her too. And as we're talking about things, she will write down, okay, so where I'm thinking is these might be the changes we might need to do. And we're going to do at least one of them, if not 2. And then she always wants what my opinion is so it's complete, shared decision making. And she takes notes on everything that I'm saying as far as what's better, what's not better, what parts are really inflamed. She still looks at my hands are a mess, so she'll still do all the documentation of everything. And I feel like I'm really listened to because she's making eye contact when she can, but she's documenting everything. And I still go home with that torn off sheet, and she'll go into her little spiel about, okay, so this is what we're changing. And in the very bottom of the document, it's got what I need to do. So I'm walking away with, I know exactly what I'm going to be changing.
Well, you went ahead and answered the last question, or partially, so I'll answer it. You could add to it, but you delved into, I was going to say, some of the barriers, the biggest barriers to communication in different components. So you started touching on, is there anything else that you would add as far as, this is really a barrier?
Yeah, I think, I can't remember who mentioned like simple things like eye contact. Oh, it was you, Deb, right?
Yeah.
It's just, you you know me, Tiffany, like, our visits, what I'm trying to achieve is, can we have a similar conversation if we were strangers at a bar? Right? Oh,
Yeah.
wait, well, what did I say? Yeah. Right. But that's kind of the intent. It's kind of like, it's going to be free flowing. It may be directionless for a bit of time, but at the same time, you're trying to get to just, a very comfortable stage where information is being transmitted back and forth. All right. We're trying to remove barriers. That's ultimately, at the end of the day, the biggest thing, because I am new to you as a patient. All right. And yet at the same time, I need to earn your trust almost immediately in order for you to give me the depth of information and the quality of information, including things that are going to be personal, in order to be able to get to the next step. And so, like, for me, I'm going to exercise my privilege as a man, because I think for women, this is much more difficult because of status or respect issues. In our part of the country is a problem for many of our female physicians. But like, I never wear my white coat. I don't even know where it is. I know I don't wear ties, right? I'll even wear things like this to the clinic. I have kind of this pullover, right? And largely is because I'm not at all interested in playing the game where I am the doctor and you are the patient. No, this is a conversation between two people, right? With two different skill sets and two different knowledge bases. I have a specific knowledge base that's much more generic and broad, right? For the many thousands of people with disease X. You have a knowledge base for your experience, all right? And somehow we have to bring everything together, right? And so it's a lot harder for the patient to be able to relay that experience, I think, than it is for us to be able to relay information, all right, of what we're thinking. Right. So that's, to me, the most important personal goal with each new patient, is to make sure that there's going to be no barriers. All right. I'm not going to judge you, because I frankly look at myself and think, my God, I got a lot of problems. Right. So, right. But that's kind of how I view it. All right. Is that, it's just, this is the way for us to just have that conversation at the bar. That's essentially it.
And thank you again to Deb for being part of this segment that we had here, as well as Al, or Dr. Kim, for being so candid and open with all of his stories having to do with patient communication. He talks about, how he learned how he had to communicate with patients. And we appreciate that so much as patients, as doctors learn how to communicate with us best, because it is a two-way street when it comes to communication. So I think that in itself, him showing that he's willing to, see how we would like to be communicated with and what works best, is such an amazing takeaway from that clip. And speaking of communication, there's actually something really big that Tiffany and part of the AiArthritis team has been working on when it comes to communication with juvenile idiopathic arthritis. So if you want to talk a little bit about that, Tiffany.
Sure. There is a project that we have been working on for about a year now with Purple Playas Foundation. So shout out to that amazing organization that focuses on chronic conditions in children. And it is a full series communication. It's shared decision making, is communicating and doing health treatment plans with your rheumatologist, with your healthcare providers. This takes it actually a notch up from there. And they are a series of communication aids that families can use in any phase of the journey, from mystery patient to diagnosis, from diagnosis to treatment plans, and in any of the specialists that you may see along in your journey. These are created with several different specialists and many families. This is a first of its kind, like everything AiArthritis does, something a little bit different than you've seen before. We are getting ready to pilot test these in a pediatric rheumatologist office. So stay tuned, and you can learn more about these at aiarthritis.org/JIA communication. All right, so we are going to jump into the third and final of the top three. And this one is near and dear to my heart because it's really the reason I founded the organization in the first place, called Why Won't They Diagnose Me? And I was the mystery patient. And I was telling Layla before we did this, we obviously have an info at email, we have an 800 number, etc. The number one request that we get is for materials, education. Please help me get diagnosed. We know that most of us start as a mystery patient, not all. We also know that about 50% of us either end up with an undifferentiated disease diagnosis, which could be undifferentiated connective tissue, undifferentiated spondyloarthritis. There's lots of different words that fall under this undifferentiated category. And even though about 25% get that, we say 50% because the other 25% or so actually could get a diagnosis of undifferentiated. They just go with nothing. And either way, that is very, very dangerous because we need to get on medications, which you can do with undifferentiated. You'll hear in this clip, actually, that I was told no treatments with it. So not only did I have a trouble getting diagnosis, I didn't even get the right treatment. So very important to ours. Anything else to tee this one up, Layla?
No, I think that definitely just thinking about all of the different projects that we do at AiArthritis with this subject. We definitely have some resources that are premiering, including our mystery patient guide that is a collaboration with this episode, that we are trying to get more information from patients in order to put together this mystery guide. And so if you go to the website page of episode 90, there will be a link there for you to submit any diagnosis advice for patients that are going through the mystery patient stage. And so we would love for you all to give us some insight. Let us know how it was to be diagnosed. If you were diagnosed recently, that's really something that we want to hear. So like I said, you can go to the AiArthritis Voices 360 page, go to episode 90, Why Won't They Diagnose Me? And there will be a Google form there that you can fill out to help give some advice to patients.
Awesome. So let's take it away. This episode, Why Won't They Diagnose Me, was myself, Danielle, and Carrie. Let's actually break off right into that, Danielle, because when we were previewing what we were going to talk about on the show, you talked specifically about this, and I think that it leads into this bullet. We've got the window of opportunity that we're supposed to hit. And the reason why is because research shows, and we're seeing it every time we go to the ACR, every time we go to EULAR, we're seeing the word remission, and we're like, what? And remission is happening to the people who are getting the diagnosis early, who are getting the treatments early, which is why this is so important. But that's not the norm. It's not the norm. And too often we get a detour on our road. That is one of these main issues of why we're not getting diagnosed. So Danielle, why don't you talk a little bit about that point?
So I think that really breaks into two parts. First of all, as a patient, you have to know that you need help. And for me, that was a huge hurdle. And at the beginning of my journey, I was a kid. I didn't know anything. But even if you just limit it to when I was an adult and I was going to see my own doctors, you only have ever existed in your body. You don't know what other people's reality is like. So I thought everybody had chronic pain. I thought everybody was tired all the time. I thought everybody had random fevers that popped up out of nowhere. Like, I didn't know that was unusual. That was the first thing. And then when I did start asking for help, my doctors would go, oh, there's something wrong with your shoulder, go see an orthopedist. There's something wrong with your knee, go see an orthopedist. Nobody sent me to a rheumatologist for years and years and years. And in point of fact, when I did finally end up at a rheumatologist, it's because a radiologist came back and said, look, I pulled this patient's MRIs for the last 3 years, and I think this is RA. And that's when an orthopedist finally sent me to a rheumatologist. So even just recognizing that I needed to see one was a huge problem.
That's
and then the other,
go ahead.
Sorry. And then the other part of it is once you know that you need to see a doctor and you're sitting in front of one, getting them to listen to you can be a huge problem. You know, most of the people who take a long time to get diagnosed, like you guys, have seronegative versions of things. And I know we're going to talk about blood work here in a bit. That wasn't me. When they did finally test my blood, I had rheumatoid factor positive. I was ACPA positive. I mean, my blood work was screaming, this person has a rheumatic disease, but nobody ever tested it that whole time. So we know that some members of the medical community have bias that they're not aware of, and they tend to downplay women's pain. And like 90% of people with rheumatic disease are women.
Research has shown, Danielle, you mentioned you were at ACPA positive, rheumatoid factor positive. You don't need those to have rheumatoid, even though it's in the name. You don't have to have those to have. People can have rheumatoid factor positive and not have any of our diseases. It's a blood marker. In saying that people with our diseases that do have these markers have typically worser outcomes, meaning they have more aggressive disease, they might be more difficult to treat, they might just have worser flares, that type of thing. And so that's also swinging back why I realized in the beginning, undifferentiated at sometimes, not always, sometimes it is a question mark, but also other times it can mean that you have milder onset, which if you snip it and you get treatment for it, that is actually could be a good thing. In my journey, undifferentiated why, Carrie, I feel that I thought it was a bad thing was because they told me, similar to what you were told, I can't treat you, is what they told me. I can't treat you until I can figure out what this grows into, what this becomes, a full-fledged disease. So they were basically telling me, you don't actually have something. You have something that is not treatable. But once I got educated, I went back and realized there was treatment guidelines, not great ones, but there were guidelines that said I should have been treated with some mild disease-modifying agent. And I was denied that. And guess what? I got worse. Things got worse, a lot worse. And I do look back a lot today and say, I wonder if there were people like Danielle, like you, Carrie, like me, like a lot of us here at AiArthritis, like the people that you were just at the conference with, Carrie, our friends, the people we talked to, if we could unite and create some kind of guide, some kind of navigation, something for these people who are coming into AiArthritis and saying, I don't have answers. We've got to start somewhere. And I feel like, why not start with the people who are the experts, right? And that is us. All right, I'm going to turn this back over. We're looking at the outline here. Danielle, what do you specifically still want to put on the table here as a point that we talked about that we would bring up and we haven't gotten to yet?
One of the things I think it's really important for everybody who is still searching for a diagnosis to understand is that your blood work is not like a blueprint to your body. It's not something that's static. It changes all the time. It is one snapshot in time. I have tracked my markers now because my rheumatologist keeps changing my diagnosis every time I turn around for several years. I have had times where my rheumatoid factor was barely positive. I've had times where it was very positive. I've had times where my ACPA was off the charts. I've had times where it was fairly moderate. If you look at SED rate, which is sort of a generic marker that indicates how much inflammation is in your body, but a lot of doctors put a ton of weight on that. I have had times where it was normal. I have had times where it was 110 and normal is like less than 10. The pathology report that I got back that time said, evaluate this patient for cancer, because that's like those levels usually indicate something really, really bad. So just because you get back negative blood work doesn't necessarily mean even that you're seronegative. It may just mean you didn't have positive markers that day. Now, obviously, if you've had multiple tests and they're still negative, that also doesn't mean that you don't have one of these diseases. But I think it's really important for everybody to know that one test doesn't prove anything. It doesn't disprove anything.
Okay. And so there we go. Those were our top 3 of the 100 episodes that we have done so far in the AiArthritis Voices 360 talk show. This has been such an amazing journey we've had for the last few years, and we have only just begun. But we need your help to keep the show, all of our resources, and all of the great work we do as patient leaders, helping create patient-led materials to do that we say infused solutions, and that is a pun intended. So everything we do is by patients, for patients. Please consider supporting AiArthritis. $1,000 for a grand to expand. Even if you are not able to give $1,000 yourself, we are also hoping to reach that grand to expand. We're saying, hey, if you can do $100 at aiarthritis.org/donate, we will call you out publicly on a show, which will live for eternity in that episode, to thank you for the support of the work we do, not only for this show, but everything you've heard of the different projects we do. All of that goes into one big bucket, and you'll see the impact that we have together. So I just, again, as we start to wrap up these episodes, I want to remind you that everything we do at AiArthritis is for you. You could always go to aiarthritis.org/rant. That is our catch-all. Anything you want to rant about, it goes to a forum. You can be anonymous, or you don't have to be anonymous, but that drives everything we do. Everything you've heard of at our organization always first and foremost starts with talking to our peers and identifying the missing gaps that we need to do to solve. Anything else that you want to add, Layla?
Yes, and you can go ahead and submit your rant like Tiffany said. We also have had patients and other support members of their support network email us at info@aiarthritis.org, letting us know what you like about the show. What topics would you like us to talk about? Is there anything that we're, that's happening in the AiArthritis community space that we don't know about that you think is important for us to address? Let us know at info@aiarthritis.org, and we even will be able to possibly make an episode of the topic that you talk about, and we'll make sure to shout you out for that too. So let us know. And I just wanted to say in general, this exercise of being a part of this podcast and this talk show has been so helpful for me, and I've heard from my family members that they've been able to hear so much about what we go through on an everyday basis that it helps them to also understand what we go through. So if it, even if you may not have an AiArthritis disease yourself, but you have family members that do, this podcast is a really good way. This talk show is a really good way for everyone to kind of get a good feel of what an AiArthritis patient might go through on an everyday basis.
Yeah, great ad there, Layla. So thank you all for tuning in. You can also find us on social media. Just look for AiArthritis on all of the major channels. And again, you can find this talk show on our website at aiarthritis.org. Thank you all for the first 100. Looking forward to the journey together on the next 100 plus.